Hello, and welcome to episode 2 in this series of videos that I'm making in an attempt to maybe help you to make a change, inspire you to do something a little bit differently or find a different way to be a little happier in life. And I plan to do that by sharing my own journey and my own experiences. So firstly, a thank you. Thank you for all of your kind comments about the first video. It really wasn't very good, but you were some very polite people out there. So thank you very much for that. And yes, I am better. Thank you. It was touch and go. It was a very serious case of man flu, but I've soldiered through like a brave man. And yes, I've come through the other end, and there's a little bit still in my voice, but I'm strong enough to carry on. So I thought we would crack on with the second video. So I think the first thing I will do is just really talk about who I am and sort of how I got to where I am running my own business, William Hanna, making these leather notebooks, and just show you and tell you about the journey that I went through. So I suppose it goes back. I'm working class stock. Proud of my origins. Great mum and dad. My dad taught me the benefits of working hard and how you always do your best job. And my mum taught me some wonderful interpersonal skills, and I think I get a lot of my empathy from her. And yes, I've always believed in working hard for the things that you want. I think taught by my parents that's what you need to do. They provided everything we needed, but if it was luxuries or gizmos or anything else, then it was up to us to earn it. And I did a paper round when I was sort of 11 to 14 to pay for my first home computer, an Acorn Electron, for those old enough to remember what one of those is. I pushed trolleys in a supermarket and swept warehouse floors because I wanted a video recorder back in the day when they were really expensive and it was the height of technology. And I wanted one, so I worked for it and did that. I left to go to university at 18, studied retail marketing. I was so lucky that I was still of a generation that got a grant to go to university. I think if I had to go today with the debt that they expected to take on, I think it would be a very different decision. But I did enjoy my student years. I still worked behind a bar 4 or 5 nights a week for the first couple of years. For the second half, it was a 4-year course. I used to get up at 5 o'clock every Saturday morning and catch a train from Manchester to Leeds to go and do some IT data input and work with Lotus 123 to produce some reports for one of the major retailers. And I suppose, that does show. I've always believed in working hard. They paid me the princely sum of £40 a week. But as a student, you can imagine how hard it was getting up at 5 a.m. On a Saturday morning, cold and dark winter's mornings to trundle across to Leeds and do that work. But I did it because that's what you do. If you need to do something or you need the money, you do the work. So yes, left my degree, went into work in IT, in retail, testing software. Would never recommend that as a career. It's great for some people, but not for me. My attention to detail when it comes to that is quite low. So I left that job and then promptly got another job testing software for electrical wholesalers who I think have gone out of business. And that was nothing to do with me. In fact, it was probably one of the biggest lessons they taught me was how not to run a company. It really, didn't enjoy working there at all. Terrible leadership from the top. People just hated working there. The way they were treated, and yes, I really learned how not to treat people. So here's a prime example that when I was interviewing for the job, one of the big features was that they gave you flexi time, that you could be flexible with your working hours. You could come in a little early, you could go home a little later, as long as you did the work and racked up the hours, and you could carry 7.5 hours forward, which is a full day's work, and take a day off next month, except if you tried to use it. If you tried to use that 7.5 hours to get an extra day off, it was seriously frowned upon, and people used to get called into the manager's office to explain why they'd used up these hours that they'd banked, because that really wasn't in the spirit of it. I would have thought that's exactly in the spirit of it, but anyway, I digress again. So left there, then had a great job. Thoroughly enjoyed the next couple of years working in IT again for a pharmaceutical company, and learnt a lot. Worked with some really great people. Thoroughly enjoyed it. Was challenged. Developed some new skills. Left there when that business was taken over, and worked in IT again. See a theme here. So yes, worked in IT, network manager. For a company that supported the pharmaceutical industry. Enjoyed it, hard work. Again, learnt a lot about people, and worked hard for a couple of years. But then got the opportunity to go back to a pharmaceutical company and do international IT. Used to travel the world and talk about systems and different types of infrastructures, and share the thoughts of the head office with the affiliates around the globe. And wow, how lucky was I. Got to visit about 33 different countries, all done, because this was the days of big pharma, and everything was business class, and the nice hotels, and had a thoroughly wonderful time. Well, actually, no. There were some great perks, and I really enjoyed it, but it wasn't the job for me, and I found myself being bored and not particularly challenged, and decided to go back to the IT servicing company, and stayed there for I think the next 15 years. Worked my way up through the technical route into operations, became responsible for a direct mailing part of the business, the delivery of all of that, for a big customer database, and all of the systems and software delivery, and then moved into the top job in the UK for that company. Ran the company for I think about 7 or 8 years. Interesting, when I took the job, it was still in the old Hiram days of software, and when you got the top job, it meant that you got a much nicer chair, but they moved it closer to the door because you weren't expected to be there much longer. But then it got taken over by a French company with a very different attitude, very much more of a long-term view. And I know if you read my daily post, you'll see that it sounds a bit negative about my corporate life. It wasn't the companies that I was working for necessarily. They're as good a company as any, really, probably better than a number of companies, and I did very well out of it all. But it just wasn't for me. It wasn't the role for me. Sort of having to do the things that I had to do, and I think it's quite difficult. Sort of when you're in the sort of most senior position, but all of your lords and masters are out in other countries. It can be quite isolating. And you've got people below you who are looking to you for direction and what needs to go, and if they're not happy with the decision the company's making, you have to represent that. Yet at the same time, you've got the people above you who wanted to implement new things and do things differently, which was against the view. And you sort of get caught in this sandwich, and then add in the bitter pickle no one likes, which was some of the customers, and it just gets really quite hard, and I think over time I reached a point where I just didn't want to do that anymore. I knew I wanted to do something else, didn't know what it was, but also knew that I couldn't just walk away because I had responsibilities. So I put in place a plan, a very long-term plan, which I'll talk about in episode 4. But yes, sort of put in place a plan to leave my corporate life behind. And yeah, it took me a good few years to implement, but I finally did that in 2014. Left in around May 2014. Took 6 months off, which sounds wonderful, but in hindsight was a waste of 6 months because I wasn't really doing anything valuable with the time. And give me the time again, and I wouldn't have taken that 6 months off. I'd have just cracked straight on with something interesting. But you live and learn. I trained to be a coach. I did that whilst I was still in my corporate career, and then I did start a coaching business. Coached a few people. Loved the coaching process, and loved what I learned about myself through that, and what I learned about other people. But realised that being a full-time coach just wasn't for me. Wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do, but then sort of developed William Hanna Limited, and as you can see, from a business that sells leather notebooks, my entire background was nothing to do with leather or notebooks. I think that's one of the lessons that I'd like to share, is that where you end up isn't necessarily where you thought you would go from when you started, and the opportunities are there. And even a 40-odd-year-old bloke who's had a corporate career through and through, predominantly focused around IT, can do, I think the trendy phrase is pivot, and basically just head off in a completely different direction. After years of running someone else's company, I'm building my own from scratch. Years of having people working for me, to having to do everything myself, and learn some new skills. And it is possible. It's eminently possible. There are probably better ways to do it. In fact, I know there are better ways to do it than I've done it, but it's all a learning process. And I do hope to share some of that with you over the coming weeks. Some of the things that I've done, some of the ways I've gone around things. But also share my belief that there is no greater time in human history to do something like that. That the opportunities are immeasurable. And yes, I think we're all fortunate to be alive at this moment in time. So anyway, I'm getting off on my high horse. So so that's me. Always believed in hard work. I think there was a theme that ran through that which I didn't mention, which was triathlon, for probably 6 or 7 years, after getting really sort of quite fat and unfit, from sitting behind a desk. Tried to get fitter, found it really hard, and so wasn't able to run 2 days running, wasn't able to bike 2 days running. So I just started alternating stuff, swimming, biking, running, learnt about triathlon, and actually watched a video, and I think it's on YouTube, and it's Julie Moss, I believe, something like 1982, crossing the finish line in Ironman Hawaii. And I'm getting goosebumps now thinking about it. One of the just best examples of the inner strength that people have to achieve a goal. I really do have goosebumps. It always makes the hair stand up on the back of my neck. And I think it's awesome. So Julie Moss, Hawaii Ironman. If you've not seen it, search for it on YouTube, and it's just completely awesome. Yes, did Ironman. Wasn't very good. Was always in the bottom half of the finishers. Got to be in the top, maybe even third of finishers. Built up my distances. Did an Ironman triathlon. Fittest I've ever been at, what would it have been, about 45 I think I was at the time, 45, 46, fitter than I was at 18. So again, just an example of it's never too late. Okay, it might be a bit harder and you might ache a bit more, but there's nothing that you can't do, and there's no way, you can be better than you were in your earlier years, I think. So yes, this is going in a direction I didn't expect it to. They are going to be fairly unscripted. I've got some post-its along the cupboard door that this camera's balanced on, and they're sort of how I was going to run it, and I'm looking at it and I've missed half of it out, but never mind. So I hope that was helpful. I've rabbited on quite a bit. It's just about coming up to 15 minutes, so I think I need to stop there. If you've managed to make it all the way through, thank you. I've said a lot less, I think, but I have prattled on. So next time I'm going to work on trying to be a bit more compressed and condensed with what I'm doing. So thank you very much. If you've enjoyed it, wow, really? If you've been able to bear it, thank you, and maybe leave a comment or leave something in the comments. And if you know someone who is struggling and or is maybe thinking about leaving their corporate life behind, or keeps talking about wanting to make a change but doesn't quite know what to do, I'm not the guru. I can just share what I did, and it seemed to work. So over the coming weeks, I'm going to share how I did that, and that may be of value. So if you know anybody that may be useful to, maybe send them in this direction, get them to subscribe. So I'm going to leave it there, say thank you very much, and I will speak to you in a few days' time.